let's talk about Donald Trump telling the Israelis, look, Israel, we're not going to be dragged into a war with Iran for you guys. We're not going to do it. That's what Donald Trump said recently. And there was an article that was published about this by Haaretz, and I think that Donald Trump said this in an interview with Time magazine, if I'm not mistaken. And it says here, Trump, Netanyahu, may go into a war with Iran, but the U.S. will not be dragged in. Now, remember, last week I talked about this, and I uploaded the video from the stream. And what did I say? I titled the video, "The United States Tells the Israelis Off." Because for a long time, the Israelis have been trying to goad the Americans into a war with the Iranians. This happened under Obama. When Obama was president, they tried to do this, and Obama did the Iran deal. And now they're trying to do it with Donald Trump. And guess what the Trump administration is pushing for? Another deal with the Iranians. And if you look at the deal that Steve Witkoff has been elaborating on, it's pretty much the same thing that the Obama administration hammered out with the Iranians. So it looks like, Trump removed the Iran deal. He got rid of it. He dismantled the whole Iran deal. And now his administration, through Steve Witkoff, is saying, oh, well, we can have a deal with the Iranians where they could have nuclear energy. And supposedly Pete Hegseth said, not in public, but privately, Pete Hegseth said that if you tell the Iranians that they cannot have nuclear energy anymore, then you destroy any prospects for a deal. So you have to allow the Iranians to have some sort of nuclear material. That's exactly what the Obama administration concluded. That's exactly what they concluded. So it looks like we may be going into another Obama-type Iran deal. Trump bashed Obama for having an Iran deal, but maybe Trump will do some little variation here so he could say, well, it's actually different from what Obama hammered out. But nonetheless, they're going after a deal with the Iranians to the ire of the Israelis. The Israelis are getting pissed off about this, in other words. And the Israelis are saying, okay, America, we can go do some strikes on Iran. And Trump is saying, listen, Israel, you can do whatever the hell you want, but just don't drag us into this. Don't drag us into another blood-stained desert war. U.S. President Donald Trump asserted that he did not prevent Israel from attacking Iran in a wide-ranging interview published on Friday that also covered the war in Gaza and a potential Israeli-Saudi normalization deal. So Trump is very interested. And I said this before Trump entered office. I said he wants to establish normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Now, there were talks about normalization when Trump was president. And then there were talks about normalization right before the October the 7th attack. October the 7th happened, and then what happened? Israel started bombing Gaza. Saudis said, okay, we can't have normalization talks if you're going to be butchering Palestinians because that doesn't make us look good. That makes us look bad if we're going to be in cahoots with you guys. So now Trump wants to bring back the talks, and he wants to establish normalization. Is it going to happen? I suspect that it will happen, just given the fact that Iran is a big threat to the Saudis and to the Israelis. And the Arabs and the Saudis will join forces. Saudi Arabia understands that Iran is an existential threat to its very existence, and Saudi Arabia has a pretty powerful air force. Israel also has a pretty powerful air force, so together they could be a pretty solid alliance. But again, you also have Turkey, which is both anti-Israel and anti-Saudi Arabia. So it's not looking good either way. The whole point is that Donald Trump, at least in public, is not going around saying, oh, well, we're going to join the Israelis, boots on the ground, we're going to have a whole war with Iran for Israel. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, don't drag us into it. And this is something that the MAGA people really love because they voted for Donald Trump primarily, or at least to a great extent, because Donald Trump marketed himself as an anti-war guy. And that's what people want to see. People want to see him being adverse to the idea of America going to war for another country. That's what people want to see. And Trump is trying, I think, to fulfill that. I could be wrong. So it says here, so Donald Trump told Time magazine, I didn't stop them, meaning he didn't stop Israel from attacking Iran, but I didn't make it comfortable for them because I think we can make a deal. So Israel said, we're going to do this attack. Trump said, we're not going to get involved. And now Trump is saying, what? Trump is saying, I didn't stop the Israelis. In other words, if Israel wants to do an attack on Iran, Israel can do it. We're just not going to get involved. And look at the words that Trump uses here in his interview with Time magazine. He says, I didn't stop the Israelis from attacking Iran, but I did not make it comfortable for them because I think we can make a deal. So he's not making it easy for the Israelis to attack Iran. And he said this very recently. When asked if he was concerned that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu would drag him and the United States into a war with Iran, Trump said, no. You asked if he dragged me in, like I'd go in unwillingly. No, I may go in very willingly. If we can't get a deal, if we don't make a deal, I'll be leading the pack. So Trump is saying, yeah, I will attack Iran if we can't make a deal. But it's going to be on America's accord. It's going to be on my accord, meaning Trump's accord, and not to the behest of Israel. That's what Trump is saying. And so if America decides to attack Iran, and I really hope that doesn't happen, but if America ever decides to attack Iran, the Americans are going to say, we're not doing this because of Israel. We're doing this because we want to do this. It's to our interest. And regardless of that, people are still going to point the finger to the U.S. government and say, you're doing this for Israel. And Trump went on to say, it's possible we'll have to attack because Iran will not have a nuclear weapon, but I didn't make it comfortable for them. But I didn't say no. Ultimately, I was going to leave that choice to them, meaning the Israelis. Then I said I would much prefer a deal than bombs being dropped. So the U.S. doesn't want to get into a war with Iran because it'd be very ugly. You could bomb Tehran to oblivion, but the moment you put troops on the ground, that's when everything changes, and you have to deal with militias, Shiite militias, Iranian Revolutionary National Guard. I mean, it's a whole mess. You'll have a lot of casualties, and you'll have a lot of those American flag draped coffins coming back home. And people don't want to see that. I don't want to see that. They don't want a repeat of Iraq. And if you go to war with Iran, it won't be a repeat of Iraq because it'll be much worse than Iraq. Much worse. Because you're dealing with an organized military force. You're dealing with a military that has decent weapons. You're dealing with a military force that's very organized, that's united under Shiaism. Hezbollah will be involved. Shiite militias in Iraq will be involved. The Iranian military will definitely be involved. It'll be very ugly. So it says here, when asked if he were open to meeting with Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, he replied, sure. The president also addressed possible Saudi-Israeli normalization. He said that he believes the Saudis will join the Abraham Accords, meaning that they will do normalization with Israel. And he said, I have very good relationships in the Middle East, and I think all over the world. So there you go. Trump told the Israelis off yet again. And he's telling them off. He's saying, you will not drag us into a war, Israel. You won't do this. And I hope that it never happens. I hope that it never happens and we don't have to see another American war in the U.S. because it'll just lead to more destruction, more death, more terrorism, more just insanity. And the Israelis don't care. The Israelis want this sort of thing to happen. They want a war. They don't give a shit. They're very reckless. The Israelis are very reckless. They're the ones who were pushing the war against Saddam Hussein. They were pushing for the ousting of Saddam Hussein. And what did that cause? The rise of Iran, the rise of Turkey. And now they're complaining about the Iranians. When is this insanity going to end? Right? When's the insanity going to end? It's just, okay, overthrow Saddam Hussein, overthrow this guy, now go to war with Iran. So you did what we wanted. You overthrew Saddam. Iran rose up as a result. Now we got to overthrow that guy. Turkey's rising up because, well, we wanted the ousting of Bashar al-Assad. Okay, we ousted Bashar al-Assad. Now Turkey's rising up. Okay, help us with Turkey now. It's like you guys keep wanting certain policies to be done that lead to more and more problems for you guys. And then you want other countries to help you deal with the problems that what you pushed for led to. The insanity never ends. Iran is not Iraq yet. Whole different beast. Absolutely. Would Turkey take advantage and attack Israel if the U.S. gets bogged down in a war in Iran? Let me think about that. If there is a war in Iran, Turkey would definitely rise up even more, because then it would see an opportunity to say, well, we have to make sure that this war is not going to boil over into Turkey, and so we got to put more soldiers into Iraq to make a buffer zone, and we're going to make our military bigger, and Israel caused all this havoc, we didn't want this, and so it's going to increase and intensify and amplify and exasperate tensions between Israel and Turkey, and it's just like when they removed Saddam, it led to the rise of Iran. Just like when they removed Assad, it led to the rise of Turkey. In both of these cases, it has been utterly problematic at an existential level for Israel. So the more that you do, the more that you fulfill what Israel wants, the worse it is for Israel. Now they want Russia to get involved to keep the Turks at bay. They want the Americans to keep the Turks calm. It just never ends. And this is why I always say, keep things the way they are. Saddam is there, keep him. Assad is there, keep him. The EU is there, keep it. Keep things the way they are. You remove Saddam, you have Iran. You remove Assad, you have Turkey. You remove the EU, guess what? You're going to have a whole purely militaristic Germany under pure German nationalism. You're going to have Nazis. Just keep things the way they are. They're underestimating Iran, definitely. Not only does Iran have the capacity to have a Mahdi pretender to use Islamists, but they also have mountains and a strong military. Yeah, they have mountains. It's a very mountainous country. There's different climates in Iran. There's different atmospheres. There's different terrains, topographies in Iran. It's just a very difficult place. You want to really go to war in Iran and put soldiers there? It's just a mess. It never ends. More death, more mayhem, more war. Can we just all relax? But that's not going to happen. Syria is now basically a Turkish colony. Yup, 100%. By the way, do you think the cause of Israeli radicalism is because the people that immigrated to Israel were probably the most nationalist ones, and since they would have to drop their entire lives to move back? I don't know. I think the nationalism in Israel is really the result of different factors. You have, for one thing, Islamic terrorism, which fuels Israeli nationalism. And then on top of that, you have fanatical Judaism, which is based on the Talmud that says that non-Jews are inferior. So you have that. There's different factions. There's different factors, but it's really an amalgamation between a response to terrorism and really just plain old militarism and racism and religious bigotry. People are evil. I mean, we have to factor that in. People are evil, and you have people who don't mind murdering people because they are of a certain ethnic group, or because they are of a certain religion, or because they are of a certain race or nationality, and those people are evil. They will murder people under certain pretexts, under certain justifications, but regardless of the pretext that they reference to, they are still evil, because at the end of the day, murder is evil. So there was an article that was published on RT recently, and it's about how the Trump administration has switched its position when it comes to Iran. Very interesting article. I highlighted some parts of it. And it says here, at the outset of negotiations, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, an outspoken Iran hawk, meaning he is very against Iran, laid down a hardline condition. Iran must completely dismantle its uranium enrichment program if it wanted to any deal with the U.S. So Iran must get rid of any sort of uranium enrichment if it wants a deal with the U.S. But after the Muscat meeting in Oman, a special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, who led the U.S. delegation, struck a very different note. In an interview with Fox News, he suggested that Tehran might be allowed to maintain limited uranium enrichment for peaceful energy purposes. Isn't that what Obama did? So we're going back to Obama. We're going back to the Iran deal. They should have just kept the Iran deal there. And from day one, I said that was a bad idea. Years ago, I said it's a bad idea to pull out of the Iran deal. And all these assholes, all these Trump tards were telling me, oh no, it's actually great because Iran's a terrorist state. And so, yeah, but the uranium enrichment was being what? It was being proctored, it was being surveilled, it was being watched, and the people who were reporting on it were saying, yeah, Iran is keeping their part of they're keeping their deal, their end of the deal. And yes, the uranium enrichment in Iran has been limited under the Iran deal. Donald Trump comes along and he says, nope, we're going to pull out of it. And now what's the Trump administration doing? They're talking about making a deal with Iran in which Iran's nuclear enrichment will be limited and will be under watch. Ooh, like Obama. So it says here that Witkoff emphasized the importance of strict verification protocols to prevent any militarization of Iran's nuclear capabilities, including oversight of missile technology and delivery systems. That sounds like Obama. Notably absent from his remarks any mention of dismantlement. The shift hinted that the administration might be considering a modified return. Look at this. This shift hinted that the administration might be considering a modified return to the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, the very agreement that Trump tore up in 2018, branding it a disaster. Now he wants to go back to the Iran deal. Really, guys, it's hilarious how all this works, because they know damn well you go to war with freaking Iran. So Trump for all these years has been pushing himself as what? Anti-war. I'm an anti-war guy. I don't want war. I don't want war. I don't want war. I don't want war. Obama did war. Biden did war. I'm a peace guy. I'm a peace guy. I'm a peace guy. Now he's gonna what? He's gonna go send 3,000, 5,000 troops into freaking Tehran, into the mountains of Iran. What is he gonna do? He's gonna send them over to the Zagros Mountains so they can go fight some Shiites over there in the green luscious mountain of the Zagros. But he's the anti-war guy. So Trump, I think, wants to keep a certain image. I really hope that I'm correct and that Trump is not going to surprise us all and say, we're going to declare war and troops are going to go to Iran. That would be absolutely horrifying. Just given the ripple effects that would result because of that. But it looks like Trump wants to maintain this image of the anti-war guy. And plus, if he starts a war with Iran, everyone's going to hate him. It will destroy his popularity. Seriously, if they want to get J.D. Vance into the White House next election, the worst thing they can do is go to war with Iran. It will destroy his popularity because nobody is interested in war. The only people who are interested in war nowadays are these old boomer war hawks who've probably never seen war. Most people, the great majority of Americans have zero interest in war. So if Trump says we're going to go to war, that destroys his popularity. So Israel said, America, go to war, and America said no. Thank God, right? Thank God. It says here that, but the pivot didn't last. Just one day later, Witkoff reversed course in a post on X, doubling down on the demand for full dismantlement of Iran's nuclear and weapons program. So they're going back and forth. Again, we have yet to see what's going to happen from this whole thing. According to Axios, Trump huddled with top national security officials just 3 days after the Muscat talks to reassess the U.S. strategy. In that meeting, Vice President J.D. Vance, Witkoff, and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth argued for a pragmatic approach. Oh, so they weren't going hardcore. They weren't saying, yeah, give him hell, put a boot up Iran's ass. They didn't go. They weren't going down that route in this meeting. They were pushing for a pragmatic approach, pushing Tehran to dismantle its entire nuclear infrastructure. They warned would tank the talks. So in other words, you can't tell the Iranians that they have to dismantle all of their nuclear infrastructure or else Iran's not going to agree to anything. So it looks like Iran's got a lot of leverage here. And the thing is that Iran does have leverage here. Why? Because nobody wants to freaking invade Iran. That's why. Iran is a poor country. Its economy is not doing very good. Its currency has been free-falling for a while from what I understand. But Iran still has leverage in the sense that it can strike Israel. It has the capacity to make nuclear weapons. And who the hell wants to invade Iran? So Iran does have fighting stats here that it can use against the Americans. So the Americans want to take a diplomatic approach. Because Iran could hit Israel. And remember, when Iran did hit Israel, the Iranians were distracting the projectile / missile interceptors that the Israelis and the Americans were using. They were distracting them with missiles and drones, and then they would hit Israel with these super fast missiles. Now imagine if one of those really fast missiles was armed with a nuclear bomb. You drop one nuke on Israel, it devastates the whole country, because Israel is the size of New Jersey. You drop one nuke on Iran, it would be devastating, but Iran could recover because it's a massive country. You drop one nuke on Tel Aviv, it's a disaster. It cripples the whole Jewish state. So it's a very sensitive situation. And there's a big, fat, deep fault line in the middle of all this. So Iran sent a warning to Israel when it hit Israel with a barrage of missiles. It told the Israelis, we can hit you, and we can hit you hard. So it's a difficult situation. And if the U.S. invades Iran, you're going to put thousands of troops on the ground. You're going to have mass deployment, mass casualties. No amount of country and Western music is going to convince the American people that that's a good idea. You could get Toby Keith's great-grandson, and you could get, Montgomery Gentry. You can get all these country Western singers. Alan Jackson, whoever. Put them all together. Make all the pro-military songs. People will respond with a big F you and a big fat middle finger. No one's going to give a shit. Now, you could have a false flag attack in which the United States kills its own people and then blames it on the Iranians. That could happen. And that could convince enough people that war is good. I could see that happening. But it would have to be something really, really ugly and destructive. So it says here that Iran had already made it clear that such sweeping concessions were off the table. Vance even suggested Washington should brace for some level of compromise. Ooh, so Vance wants compromise with the Iranians. I wonder why. Maybe it's because he wants to run for the presidency. And he knows that if a war happens and he's the vice president, all the bad shit that would happen in such a war is going to be blamed on Trump and Vance. He knows this. Just look at the whole Israel thing. All the anti-Israel people blame too Biden. They blamed Harris. Look at the disaster of the Ukrainian war. What were people saying? They were blaming Biden. They were blaming Harris. So if you have a war in Iran and it's under Trump's call and Trump's watch, and Vance wants to run for president, every disaster that would happen in such a war with Iran would be put on the shoulders of Vance. So it says here, but not everyone agreed. A rival faction led by Waltz and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Ooh, the Zionists. Ooh, they're kicking in. The Rubio guy, Jesus, Gloria Jesus, we love Israel. Right, here comes the Hispanic Zionist, Mr. Rubio. Saw things differently. Of course they did. Of course they saw things differently because they're getting that AIPAC money. Got to get that AIPAC money, man. They argue that Iran's current vulnerability gave the U.S. a unique upper hand, one that shouldn't be squandered. If Tehran failed to meet America's terms, they insisted the U.S. should be ready to strike militarily. Oh my God, dude. Holy shit. Why did Trump bring these assholes in? Why do you bring in these old neocon Zionists in? Don't bring these people into government. Damn, I hate them. More war, more destruction, more death. And Marco Rubio is going to be sitting in Miami smoking a cigar while people are being killed in the Middle East. What a bunch of evil people. I hate these people. I hate these Zionist thug bastards. No amount of country music will convince Americans to go to war. You can quote me on that one. It's on the record. The divide exposes a deeper strategic rift within the Trump administration. Who's going to win? Is it going to be the neocons, or is it going to be the people who want to approach this whole situation more pragmatically, without war and death? Between the maximalist view that Iran must be completely disarmed and the more flexible position that aims to curb weaponization while preserving peaceful enrichment lies a vast gray area. Do we do a deal? Well, so far, Trump is pursuing a deal, which is what people were saying when Obama was president, proving that what happened under the Obama administration was a good idea. Wasn't a bad idea. It wasn't a bad idea. Why pursue death and mayhem and destruction? Why? Just why? Life is too damn short to be going to war. The lack of a unified message or even basic consensus risks leaving the U.S. at a disadvantage against a seasoned and coordinated Iranian negotiating team. And the Iranians are very sharp people. They're not stupid people. In short, Trump finds himself in a difficult balancing act. On one hand, it's clear he wants to avoid military escalation. The decision to send Witkoff, a figure known for his willingness to compromise, signals a genuine interest in diplomacy over saber rattling. If hardliners had the upper hand in Washington, it's unlikely the second round in Rome would have happened at all. On Monday, April 21st, Trump cautiously told reporters the talks were going very well, but warned that the real progress would take time. His choice of words reflected a desire to stay flexible while acknowledging the complexity and risks of negotiating with Tehran. Optimism seems more palpable on the Iranian side. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said the two sides had found significantly more common ground in Rome than in Muscat. His remarks suggest that momentum is building and that real progress may be on the horizon. And I hope to God that this is the case. I hope to God that these talks go well, that they do a deal, and that war is prevented. Because I don't want to see war. I just don't want to see war. So it says here that despite these tensions, major international outlets have confirmed that 2 more rounds of talks are planned, one in Geneva next week and another in Oman the week after. The continued diplomatic activity points to a shared interest in keeping the conversation alive. For now, both Trump's measured optimism and Iran's cautious tone suggest that, at least in the next term, the risk of war has receded. And I hope this is the case. I really do. I know that you have these lunatics in Israel who are pushing for war. The Israelis are very reckless. They wanted Saddam to be gone. Saddam was taken out, and Iran rose up. And they said, "Oh, we have another problem. Help us. Remove Assad." They removed Assad. Now Turkey. Now they're saying, "Oh, Russia, America, help us." It's just you do what they want, and then another problem arises as a result, and then they want you to take care of that problem, and then that problem becomes the new existential threat. And it's just annoying and tiresome. It's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting. And look at the result. Let's look at the result of Israel's desires. Well, before we get to that, let's get to your comments real quick. Hold on a second. If he starts a war, then he won't win a third term. Yeah, exactly. Can he really run for a third term? I don't know. It could be just... I think it's bullshit, but I think if you're going to do that, there's going to have to be some huge national emergency that would then give him the opportunity to say, vital measures must be done. Dramatic things must be done, and then he'll say we gotta do a third term sort of thing. I remember someone saying America doesn't lose wars, it loses the will to fight. Yeah, unless somehow by some miracle someone manages to invade U.S. soil, there's no shot. Absolutely, yeah. And even if you have a massive terrorist attack in the U.S., that would get people to be riled up to support a war in Iran. That war will be dragged on, and people will just eventually hate it and say the war is bullshit. And then they'll realize that the attack was a false flag attack done by some CIA operatives, and then they'll say, yeah, we were hoodwinked and this is bullshit. Israel is digging its own grave. Absolutely. The people's will doesn't have anything to do with the Pentagon. Well, it does actually, because how do you get people to fight? That's the question. You need spirit, right? So you need people to fight a war. You need weapons to fight a war, but then you need spirit and will. And if people are not incentivized to go to war, you're not going to have very good soldiers. You're going to have very unwilling soldiers, and you're going to have an army of slaves, and they're not going to fight very well. To get people to fight well, you got to give them something to believe in, and you have to make them think, or at least they have to think that they are fighting for a necessary and righteous and just cause for their country and for their very existence. And if you don't have those things, then you're just going to have a bunch of people who are forced to fight. And you're going to have, like I said, an army of slaves. And it just wouldn't be very efficient. So if people didn't matter, then there would be no false flag attacks. I mean, there wouldn't, for example, why were they so interested in Operation Northwoods? Because they wanted people to hate Cuba. Why in Operation Gladio was the CIA doing CIA and other Western intelligence agencies doing false flag attacks because they wanted people to hate Russia because they were blaming the terrorist attacks on the communists. So people definitely do matter. Without people, you can't have a war. So you have to convince people that what they're doing is right. That's very important. If the Pentagon decided, oh, just willy-nilly out of its own ass, we're going to go to war, it just wouldn't happen. People wanted to go to war with Iraq before 9/11, but they just didn't do it because they didn't really have a serious reason to do it. They didn't have a pretext. 9/11 provided them the pretext. Before Germany invaded Poland, you had a false flag attack done by the Germans in which Polish terrorists, who were really just Germans dressed up as terrorists, took over a German radio station and they took the people in the building hostage. And then the German army came and saved the day and they killed a terrorist when the reality was that they just took some poor Polish dude who was in his 40s, poisoned him, and then carried his body for a photo op and said, "We got him, guys." And then Hitler said, "Oh, Polish terrorist, oh my God, let's invade Poland." So of course people matter. Of course the will of the people matters. Of course if you can't convince people to go to war, it's very difficult to go to war. I'm sure if you talk to the average Russian, they will tell you that the war in Ukraine is necessary.